Drawing on kind of actually the parts in between each of these steps, what were the kind of pivotal moments when you thought, I've loved this, but I'm ready for something different?
I mean, the way I've described the journey, it sounds quite like, wow, and then you realize this, and then you
Mm.
realize this. But actually, yeah, normally it comes from quite a kind of a discomfort.
It's the fear of kind of stepping into that unknown, as you said. Like this doesn't feel right, but actually almost that paralysis of, but I don't know what to do next. So I think the fact that you've also done it quite a few times just shows that, like, yes, it is possible and there will be something there, but sometimes you've just got to step into that unknown.
Sometimes we need a kind of landing spot in
Mm.
between when we don't know what we're doing, and the kind of total unknown feels too frightening. I think, some people say, life's short, just do it. And other
Mm.
people say, life's long, like just do it. And I think if both of those are right,
Like that awareness of what's pulling your attention, I think, and then like just bringing that awareness to the surface a little bit, because I think we can just be like, oh, that's just, yeah, everyone thinks like that or whatever, but actually it's like, no, that is your thing, go after it.
and you're right, we have so much inspiration around, whether that's Instagram,
Mm.
podcasts, and just hearing what people are up to. And rather than deciding, oh, that's them, I can't do that, being like, what is it about that? And how could I express that?
Welcome back to another episode of Fully Blooming. This week I'm joined by Blaise Boulton, who I haven't actually met in person, but I've met online and did an incredible coaching session with her probably back in January now that we were just talking about, and the remnants are still there. She is absolute magic. And even though we haven't met in person, I really wanted to invite her onto this podcast because I think she has such an interesting path and so much wisdom to share about kind of those career changes, especially, the way that we're told that we're meant to go and then actually swerving in different directions and maybe not swerving, maybe pivoting. Swerving feels a bit chaotic, but pivoting. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. And it's, yeah, definitely being chaotic at times. So I'll go with the original.
Perfect. That swerve.
Yeah.
So going from that, let's get straight into it. And what is your kind of career path? I'm just doing this in inverted commas because I think it's got so many different meanings and things. And the way that you kind of progress and what I know is that, yeah, it's a path that maybe isn't the most tread upon path.
Sure. So shall I start with where I'm at and work back? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I'm currently working as a career and life coach. I slipped the word career in because a lot of people kind of misunderstand coaching, but generally who I work with are people who've reached some kind of success in their career, maybe like mid-careerers, but who have that sense that if things carry on as they are, they're not going to be very happy. And there's that kind of disconnection with where they thought they'd be and where they actually are. And so I'm definitely kind of a whole person approach. So sometimes it is career, but sometimes it's how we're showing up in our career. Sometimes it's how we are like treating ourselves in our life as a whole. And yeah, my kind of work is all about helping people regain momentum and a kind of sense of direction that comes from within rather than from kind of ready-made hoops of success.
Mm.
And yeah, my career has always been about kind of wanting to understand people more. And I began as a police officer in London, and I did that after kind of having done a philosophy degree. And I think part of it was just like I'd been stuck thinking about problems in a room, and I was really desperate to kind of get out there into the world and actually be with people, understanding people, um, and yeah, brilliant first experience, wild as well, and then I kind of a lot of what you deal with in the police is mental health issues, and it was something I again wanted to understand more. So I then moved to psychology and did a conversion masters and worked in inpatient hospitals. And that was yeah, amazing, very challenging, working with people kind of at the kind of hardest end of mental health, where they've been either sectioned and have to be kind of in inpatient settings. But again, amazing life experience and such a privilege to get to be with people at their worst moments and to kind of be their partner in helping them understand why that is. And then I moved to criminal justice from that. So I went and worked for a charity called Switchback, working in prisons with young people who were kind of about to be released. And that was, you get given a list of names, have to go and find them in their cells, and then talk about change and ask them, what's your plans for release? And would you, if you're up for, finding a new path, would you like some help with that? And then working with these young people through the gate. And I love that, and I think that thing of wanting to understand people led me to want to kind of understand it in a more systemic way. When you're working in prisons, you recognize a lot of systemic failings. And so I went and worked for the Civil Service Ministry of Justice after that. And part of what inspired that was, I really, having worked in prisons, thought, how could you even begin to kind of make policies and changes about prisons if you haven't kind of really experienced them inside? And so I thought, I'd bring that experience to policy making. But yeah, people and being closer to that impact and closer to that sense of connection to people drew me back to kind of more person-centered work and retraining and coaching.
Wow. I mean, I think I knew bits of that from your LinkedIn, but to hear it all like that is absolutely incredible. Wow. And yeah, the experience that you've kind of or the things and experiences that you've been through and seen. I mean, I think that's probably why you're just the coach that you are, because you've had the experience and you've kind of seen it firsthand and then say, wow, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think I've always been a very curious person and in probably quite a naive way. And so entering some of those spaces was quite frightening in a way. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? Um, but in a way, I thought it was incredible to be able to speak to people, in their worst moments and be even just like an ounce, of that journey of change they were going on.
Mm, wow. So drawing on kind of actually the parts in between each of these steps, what were the kind of pivotal moments when you thought, I've loved this, but I'm ready for something different?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've described the journey, it sounds quite like, wow, and then you realize this, and then you
Mm.
realize this. But actually, normally it comes from quite a kind of a discomfort. And at the time, often, so with the police, for example, um, you know, it's a career that people do enter for life. And a lot of people, my colleagues, their parents have been police officers um, and you're wearing the crown. It's, people do take pride in it. And so to leave that, um, I definitely had kind of shame, but I think I was feeling that sense of, wow, I'm looking forwards and I can't see a kind of career trajectory that would really excite me where I'd actually be able to be making the difference I want to make. And so I think I'd love to say it was empowered choice, but often it was like, get me out of here. And I remember, for example, with the police, like I was like, I need a reason. I can't be leaving to nothing. And so I booked like a yoga teacher training, which obviously my colleagues thought was hilarious to do afterwards. But sometimes we need a kind of landing spot in
Mm.
between when we don't know what we're doing and the kind of total unknown feels too frightening. And so often it was that. It was like, oof, something's really not aligned. I don't quite know what. I think it's probably my fault. um, and I need a kind of landing spot to figure it out. And normally on a good day, I figured out it wasn't that I had failed or that I wasn't good enough, but it was something with either the values or the type of trajectory just wasn't aligned to like what would really light me up and what I really wanted to do.
Mm. Well, and I think just even hearing that is the fact that you took that step, because I'm sure so many people were in that position or are in that position. And yeah, maybe it's the fear of kind of stepping into that unknown, as you said. Like this doesn't feel right, but actually almost that paralysis of, but I don't know what to do next. So I think the fact that you've also done it quite a few times just shows that, like, yes, it is possible and there will be something there, but sometimes you've just got to step into that unknown.
Yeah, and I think, some people say, life's short, just do it. And other
Mm.
people say, life's long, like just do it. And I think if both of those are right, obviously practicalities of life can kind of be a barrier, and I don't encourage people to kind of just, light things on fire, but equally sometimes when we're in a state of overwhelm, which I definitely had been, when I was in the police and to an extent kind of working in the hospitals, I needed to, and in the prisons, it wasn't that I was burnt out quite yet, but I could have been if I'd kind of continued. And I think that thing of if you're in overwhelm, feeling quite pressured or stressed, it's very hard to think creatively. And so, yeah, my work today with my clients, we don't launch straight into an action plan of where to go next. Sometimes it's just about how can you come up for air so that you can
Mm.
even think about what comes next.
Absolutely, yeah. And what are there any kind of points or markers that you would suggest for people to look out for if they're kind of in that situation, but maybe they're not aware of it?
I remember hearing a really good question, which was just like, um, what is my life trying to tell me? What is the experience of life I'm having trying to tell me? And I think it was, it's kind of linked to the hero's journey. And, life will throw things at you, and are you willing to listen? Sometimes we can't listen. Um, and that's okay. But I think to be curious about that question is a nice one rather than how have I screwed up in my, how what have I done wrong? Just what's life trying to tell me? Like, is it that I'm feeling really like, you know, jittery and not nice with my colleagues? And is that trying to tell me that I'm a not nice person, or is that trying to tell me I'm not on my best right now? And to kind of get curious about why that is.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, rather than kind of internalizing it and making something about there's something wrong with me, it's actually, oh, is there
Yeah.
something being shown to me? Or I love that.
Yeah, and sometimes we can be quite attached to old intentions or what worked for us before. Maybe at the start of your career, like I was just hungry for experience, blah, 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 throw yourself everywhere. But then maybe you get to a point in life where just throwing yourself at the next thing is, getting in the way of you actually building something like big and for yourself. So you have to watch out for like where things work for you before suddenly they don't, and kind of be willing to move with that.
Mm. I remember, I think, reading something or writing something of like, you're allowed to change your mind and what you wanted last year or even last week or last month. Maybe it just doesn't sit right anymore and kind of having that acceptance. And I think I remember when I got that, I was like, oh, wow. Like
Mm,
and I think moving on to like more of kind of the identity around that we put around our jobs and everything and how that yeah we might become so attached to it and to actually start to yeah like I am a police officer, this is what I do, or I am, I don't know, for me it was like ski instructor, and it was kind of like it really for me it felt very limiting and quite
mm.
blocking, and then it's like, well, but what if I'm not anymore, like who am I?
Yeah, completely. Like people who say we when they refer to the work that they do within their company, like fascinate me.
Mm,
I'm like, wow, like your identity is so wrapped up, and it's kind of amazing. I think, gosh, there must be real pride there. Um, but equally, yeah, some of my moves, and I think, leaving the civil service and doing what I'm doing now, part of that was like, I want to know who I am outside of an organization, and had kind of been on that journey myself through coaching and my own kind of trial and error experiments. And yeah, kind of thought actually now is my time to really do that, because I don't want to like fill my life with, things and responsibilities that then identify me. I want to like figure it out now. And obviously it's not a process that ever ends, but I think if you can kind of prioritize your identity outside of the titles, outside of the accolades, um, it will serve you forever.
Mm. Yeah, and actually, I really resonated with what you were saying earlier of kind of that, like just going for everything. And it's kind of,
Yeah.
if the opportunity's there, fantastic, take it. Why would you not? And yeah, I think there
Mm,
is I've definitely the last couple of years kind of got to this point of like, yes, and not that it's like, oh, is it going to contribute to this or whatever, but it's like, does that actually feel aligned anymore? And kind of, yeah, moving from your 20s to your 30s, there is a big shift. And I was always like, no, I'm never going to be that person who's like on the career thing. And it's like, no, now I can
mm.
kind of just see a much more like clear path. But I think also you've got to be at that stage of just throwing yourself at everything. And so it's that understanding the balance between like, this is now and it might not be there for the future as well.
Completely. And I think a lot of the people I work with actually have never had the chance to throw themselves at everything,
Mm,
through being a high achiever or through being on a, set career path. It's suddenly like, oh gosh, like life feels quite boxed in and quite small. And the thought of not having this job title like feels essential and yet terrifying,
mm.
and who would I be without it?
Mm. And I'm speaking for myself, but I don't know what your experience was. But like so we went to the same school. That's how we actually
Mm,
met through an old, what is it? An old
alumni
alumni
thing.
network thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, there was kind of a lot of pressure to go a certain way in that time, and whether I was putting it on myself or feeling it, or whether it was actually there or not. But I think to almost like feel that I went and did my ski instructor training. And it was this kind
Mm,
of, it did feel like I was kind of breaking out of what everyone else was doing. And that was quite isolating because I think it was everyone's going to university, everyone's doing this. And, I'm going off on this path and it's quite, gosh, no one's coming with me almost. And I think that might be also
mm.
like maybe what you experienced at the police service of like, I'm going to go and do this and everyone else is still there. And maybe it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, the school I went to before was actually even like way more get your A stars, go home.
Mm.
So the school we went to was quite like freeing for me. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna like run random societies about music and things. But yeah, I think what really helped was um when I was at university, I was just like desperately looking for who inspires me. And I had a really romantic view of what I thought university would be from like movies and stuff. I thought all be like sitting around in a room having really in-depth conversations, and it wasn't. It was kind of like skipping lecture, doing the bare minimum. And so I the friend of mine set up this thing in London, which was called Tomax Talks, and it was kind of you have three speakers um, in a pub or some informal setting, speaking on a topic, and then you have kind of quite an in-depth Q&A with the audience. And I kind of loved what he was doing and set up a Edinburgh version that I was studying at Edinburgh. And one of those was actually the key turning point for me in police. And I've been kind of obsessed with this woman just through like reading newspapers, who was the superintendent in Glasgow. And she'd halved Glasgow gang crime not by like locking everyone up, but by introducing these new measures where they would kind of track these gangs and then bring them all into a courtroom, have like victims, mums kind of telling the stories, have victims, people who'd left gang crime talking and kind of showing all the images, videos they had and being like, we know who you are, we know where you're going. You either kind of find a way out and we're going to help you through like employment opportunities and stuff, or you die. It was and she was just so cool. She was very sassy, very kind of, she'd been a forensic nurse and very kind of witty, and I invited her to speak. She was a speaker on one talk I held on it was like inspiring young futures, it was called. And I was just like, yeah, like actually the CEO of whatever advertising company, not that I'd ever thought about it, I'd be like, nothing in that was like lighting me up, where somebody who'd gone and been on the ground, knew what it was like, introduce inspiring new measures, like actually make a difference in the world. I was like, yes, like this is me. I'm sign me up. And she was like, do not sign up, please. And I was like, doing it. But yeah, it's funny those moments. But
Mm,
yeah, I think finding and listening to who inspires you, what kind of life they lead, what kind of, yeah, what they stand for, getting like curious about that information and then letting yourself have some of that too,
mm.
um, is really, yeah, can be life changing as we
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, Instagram was really key in that, just seeing kind of
really.
people. I always used it as kind of an inspiration, and I didn't realize until a few years afterwards, but the people I was following, they were traveling, they were working remotely, they were doing all of this. And I remember looking at some of the courses that they were like years ago, those initial courses of like how you can do this and everything. And then actually when that started to shift, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel aligned anymore. So again, it's that kind of pivot of, well, what does feel, and kind of more, yeah, the skiing and everything. So yeah, you just kind of got to be like that awareness of what's pulling your attention, I think, and then like just bringing that awareness to the surface a little bit. Because I think we can just be like, oh, that's just, yeah, everyone thinks like that or whatever. But actually, it's like, no, that is your thing. Go after it.
Yeah, or sometimes also when we haven't like nurtured that ability to kind of feel inspired, sometimes it might
Mm,
present as like jealousy, and then you're like, oh, like that's a horrible thing. But being like, oh, really jealous of the kind of life they're living, and think about why. And sometimes it's not, oh, they're traveling on a beach. Sometimes it's like, oh, they have so much freedom in their life. Like, what would freedom in my life, mean or look like? Um, so yeah, and you're right, we have so much inspiration around, whether that's Instagram,
mm,
podcasts, and just hearing what people are up to, and rather than deciding, oh, that's them, I can't do that, being like, what is it about that, and how could I express that?
mm,
Really cool.
absolutely. And actually, just touching upon that jealousy point, I'm sure at the beginning it was like, for me, the jealousy was like, there's something within me that believes I can't have that. And so it's like,
Mm.
oh, okay, like that's a really interesting route to go down. But at the start, yeah, as you said, it's that kind of, we've been told jealousy is the worst thing in the world and you're all of this. And it's kind of just having that space to go back and be like, oh, okay, I felt really, I don't know, triggered or emotional when I saw that. And then again, it's that kind of internal versus external. Is the world telling me, hey, this is something you really want? Or is this actually, oh my gosh, I can't have that? And who am I to think that I can? And whatever it is.
Yeah, totally. And if you're living your life, in the way that you want to be, like actually the feelings of jealousy won't be so common, because like they're not,
Hmm.
you don't need all those nuggets of information because you've listened to them, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just looking through a few of the questions that we mentioned before, and I think we've actually touched upon quite a few of them. But yeah, we've spoken about like how does the story feel on the inside compare how it looks on the outside. Is there
Mm.
anything else you want to touch upon that a little bit?
I think in terms of like understanding, your story, I think the other thing is, I think it's that Kierkegaard quote which says, we have to live our life going forwards, and yet we can only understand it looking backwards, and so I think a lot of times, like the people I meet, in my coaching, are like desperately hell-bent on like the next decision has to make perfect sense, um and like you can craft the narrative afterwards, is what I would
Mm,
say. My story, like, I've made it all line up, and I kind of understand how it lines up now. At the time it didn't, feel like that. And so yeah, I wouldn't let like it needing to be sensible on paper kind of hold you back, because I think unless, I don't know. I think people get married to this idea that like life has to be, one step up, one step up, kind of very linear. And the most interesting people out there, it's never been linear, And so I think actually wedding yourself to that idea will do you more harm than taking a reckless risk.
Mm.
and just seeing where it lands you.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I loved our session because it was like you asked, do you want action points? Are you at that stage yet? And I was like, at the time, like, nope, I just need to figure some things out and kind of just see what needs to rise to the surface. And I
Mm.
think it's that kind of maybe it's social media, maybe whatever it is, but also that kind of fast-paced society that we live in of if you kind of started to have that nudge of I need a change, not just going hell bent for leather and going all into it and just kind of like again for me it's all about that safety of like can you just take the next step towards it and rather than just yeah as you said burning everything in one go and going off and that's I
Yeah.
think it can for me that's almost like then potentially get taking you 10 steps back because you've kind of taken this huge leap and yeah people say you've got to take the leap and everything but for me it's about having that safety within yourself first and then actually the leap can just be a step it can be rather than kind of leaping all
Mm.
in feeling like yeah you've gone back 10 steps or whatever and then kind of having to rebuild yourself a lot more I think it can be a lot more gentle.
Yeah, completely. And we don't know what we don't know as well. So I
Mm.
think sometimes um, you know, when I first went to coaching myself, I remember just being like, I don't know what it is, but I just have this like sense of heaviness. Like life just feels a bit heavy, and I think it's my career, but it could be, something else. And like it took ages because I'd been in quite a tunnel vision. I hadn't been like opening windows to possibilities. So if she'd been the kind of coach like, right, career, yes, tell me your strengths, like let's do an assessment, working out what industries you'd most like my that would have so hemmed me in. Whereas actually getting curious on things like you know boundaries in relationships and how I kind of maybe some of why I couldn't think about my own path was because I was putting all my energy into other people and other people's paths, not because they asked me to, but because how I was, so yeah, I think if you kind of get to kind of um, very set on having to make the right next step, you lose out on all this opportunity to actually just open some windows, like try something out. You've never tried things out, give it a go. Maybe taking time out away from certain relationships, which are taking all your energy. Maybe just taking some time out, you can come back to them in a new way, So it's so individual, but I think, yeah, that thing of one step um, is really helpful for
Mm.
sure.
Absolutely. And it might feel like it's a step to the left or the right, not necessarily forward, but it's just, again, like just trusting the process and just following those nudges. And
Mm.
is practically, right, we've had this kind of wake up moment of this is not what I want to do. How do you kind of because I think at the beginning there is that huge rush. Like I think I remember kind of going, oh, like, okay, I'm out of here. Like, yes, this is what I'm doing. It's quite a empowering feeling. And then kind of the practicalities of life might come into it. And how do you kind of balance the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'll try and set it to an example. So with kind of pivoting to coaching, I think the decision at the time was based on like I absolutely, had done like a taster of the course that I was interested in like a few years previous that really stuck with me. I then had a coach that was trained in that modality, and then I did module one of the course, like the foundations. I was like, yes, like this is me, sign me up, without really thinking much into the future. And for example, things like running a business or even the word business had never crossed my mind. I was like, no, I want to be a coach, like not a businesswoman. But then you come at the other end and it's suddenly like, oh my goodness, like okay, the thing is amazing and a calendar full of coaching calls would feel and be incredible. But now it's like the practicalities of how do you make this work as a business. And I think um, a couple of things really helped. I think the first one is kind of getting a bit clear. Okay, once you've found the thing and you've got, like you say, that charge, actually looking, forward into the future. So 2 years time, 5 years time, like blue sky thinking, how would I love this to look? um and kind of basing that on some kind of evidence, something you've tried. So where, if that's, actually I love the one-to-one coaching, then being like, okay, actually, yeah, I'd really focus on that, and maybe 3 years down the line I'd start a group coaching thing or whatever, getting a bit clear on like what it could look like, um both practically and blue sky. So how many hours in a day do I have? How many hours in a day do I want to be working, and then once you have that, kind of working back to be like, what do I need to get there? And I think the thing that people often do, and I think it's because of that thing of like, oh, I've taken a risk, now it's on me to make it work, is go it alone. And that's what I did for sure at the beginning of my coaching journey. Was just like, oh my god, like I've got the qualification, this is so embarrassing, like that I'm not making it work.
Mm.
And actually like get supporters on board, and sometimes they're not the most obvious ones either. I remember I did a there was like this free mentoring thing. I think you now have to pay, but it's called ADP list or something. Had this call with this amazing guy, who gave me like a 3 hours mentoring on how to shape my business and the language I was using and stuff. And equally like calls with peers, but rather than them being like, yeah, it's amazing, just actually being honest, about the struggles. Because unless you're open with them, people can't help you with them. So I think, yeah, reaching out for help, getting clear on the long picture, and then definitely as a solo kind of business owner, I think just being in communication with people. And I think when you're new to what you're doing, it's quite easy to kind of have imposter syndrome. But I think reaching out to people just in service, so like, oh, I was thinking about you after I had a recent coaching call, and it made me think, you mentioned that thing, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about it, totally for free, like if you want to, or your content's incredible. I wish I could write like you, because then people just have you in mind and you're sharing your light a bit more rather than waiting to be perfect, and a finished product.
Absolutely. I mean, I resonate with all of that. I think the main bit for me was the community aspect of it. And I
Yeah.
signed up to a business coaching course, yeah, how to build your business and everything. And actually, it was great in so many ways, but the biggest benefit for me was the calls, the group calls, and just having,
Mm,
and this was still COVID-ish time, so it was just having that connection. I remember getting off the first call and being like, oh my gosh, there's other people who are in the same situation and it's not all kind of perfect. And just to have that support. And actually, now I work with quite a few of those women, and just to see
mm.
kind of how our businesses have progressed and changed and everything. But absolutely, just having that communication and kind of even going to a cafe and just having like a change of scenery or just hearing different conversations and maybe striking up a conversation or yeah, just putting yourself out there, but without the expectation of like this could be a client almost. It's I think that was quite a
Yeah,
big that was an interesting area for me to move through.
yeah, definitely, because you're kind of, I guess you're saying like I can take up space
Mm.
without being, needing to sell something. I can just be and be with you, and be okay with not knowing where that will go. Um, and then yeah, I think if you like you've said that course, if you identify, oh, um, there's something that I could, get some help with, I think as well. Like, yeah, just finding that. And I've had met an incredible supervisor, and supervision has totally changed, yeah, my coaching, because I think at the beginning, you think, okay, I'll have my own coach and that will help me kind of show up in the way that I want to be, and I'll reflect lots on my coaching clients. But obviously, you need somebody else to help you to kind of reflect on that relationship and how the mechanics of that relationship. And
Mm.
yeah, so there were just certain things like that that I hadn't fully realized that I needed, and then they kind of came into my life and I was like, yes, this is the
Mm.
thing.
Gosh, I feel like this episode is what my 25, 26-year-old needed when I first started everything, because I think it was very much like I can do this on my own. And just, it was, I also very much like was the person who quit everything and just went straight into it. So
Hmm.
was very much like, yep, this is what my intuition is telling me, and just cut all losses and go. And that was my own journey and that was my own process. But just listening to this, I'm like, there's a much like calmer way into it. Still difficult and still challenging, but yeah, my perspective is definitely changing on that. Like we don't need to go all
Yeah,
in 100%.
totally. And I think it's important to know as well when you need coaching and when you might need like mentoring.
Mm,
You know, a lot of people who I work with are changing sectors totally and kind of entering through our work together. Kind of one of the outcomes might be that they start, you know, a new kind of career path. And I think at that point, yeah, like you said, you think, oh my God, everyone's calling me brave. I've done this big thing and I just need to kind of show everyone how good I
mm,
can be. Um, but find mentors, like find people who've walked your path that um, can offer you some guidance, because sometimes it's not all about like sitting down and finding the inner wisdom. You know, sometimes it is for sure. But I've definitely really appreciated when more experienced coaches haven't charged me £5,000 for a course and
mm,
instead have like been like, yeah, sure, let's put in a call, and have been upfront about how it actually took them 4 or 5 years, you know, to get
absolutely, yeah.
where they are.
Yeah. And I think also with like just any conversations, whether it's a mentor or someone giving you guidance, actually it's then connecting and being like, oh, does that resonate with me? And you get to choose, like, yes, that's kind of the way I want to go, or that doesn't really feel aligned, but it's kind of having more of that awareness of like that again lights me up. I'm going to follow that, and just kind of opening those windows, as you said, and some of them
Mm.
might just close, and that's fine. But it's just again having those conversations, having that kind of stepping into the options, and rather than just like what we were saying earlier, like just the blinkers on and limiting yourself to one path.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because sometimes like I work with people who've maybe they've done that kind of career coaching, which is kind of strengths finders, and been given the guidance on what would suit them, or they've spoken to like a million people in a million industries to
Mm.
try and work out where they want to go, and they're still no clearer. So I think, yeah, it's a balance between like go out there for sure, ask other people, but then know when to and how to assess that in a way of like, what's the life that I want to build? Which path, you know, leads me in that direction? And if I was to work back from that path, like what might be, like you said, that first step?
Mm. Absolutely. And so we've spoken quite a lot about like, following that joy, following what lights you up, following what feels aligned. How, if someone is kind of that, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin, how would you go about like finding what your passions are, what lights you up?
Sometimes I think it's about going back. So sometimes I think, for example, like we maybe have forgotten, you know, parts of ourselves that were a bit more creative, a bit more free, a bit more less anxious about doing the right thing. So, for example, you know, a kind of really nice exercise too is like, what when I was younger, like step me into a different world, what would I do that would just fill me with ease and joy? Um and sometimes that, you know, and for me it was like dogs, animals, and it led me to do mad things recently, like foster 2 pugs and borrow my doggy. And that isn't about career path obviously, but that fills me up. And you know, sometimes I think if we're trying to make these decisions from a kind of empty cup, they're not going to be that fruitful. So sometimes I think doing things like that can help. Other things is real trial and error. So booking talks, going to classes, just trying things out. If you've been really boxed in, how could you know? You know,
Mm.
um, and if you don't have time for that, even just like a writing exercise that I love of kind of that's from positive psychology of like you write your best possible life. So fast forward 5 years, like what would you love to be
Mm.
getting up to? And that's quite a nice one because sometimes our kind of view of what we want is kind of slightly marred by like what would look cool, or and we get, oh, maybe it's San Francisco, maybe it's being a yoga teacher in Ibiza, whatever it is. And so I think just being able to write those out and be like, I'm teaching yoga every morning, and
Mm.
or I'm see you get to almost like dip your toe into that life. And that's quite a nice one for then getting clear on like, actually I love doing like yoga like twice a week for myself.
Mm.
But the idea of like, whatever it is, so that can be a really useful way. Um, but yeah, I was definitely someone who went through school kind of not necessarily nurturing passions, and had to kind of, yeah, figure that out a bit later in life. And that's okay.
Mm. I love that actually because it wasn't necessarily trying to figure out exactly right now what's my passion, because I think potentially people are in that place of like I literally don't know. So actually just kind of
Mm,
zooming out and either going into the future or going into the past. I really like that because it's just like, okay, it doesn't, let's just zoom out of right here, right now, where maybe you're feeling super overwhelmed or kind of there is no passion. And actually being like, okay, let's just take ourselves into a different situation and take that moment to breathe. So yeah, I love that. That's great.
yeah. And going back to the seasons of life thing, I think sometimes people put pressure on themselves to be doing, exciting big things all the time. And I definitely do that on occasion. I literally, it was like the other day thinking maybe I should Google how to have fun. Like,
Mm.
because I was in quite a serious mode, and then it's like, oh, actually, early stages of my business, spending a lot of my time on that, like needing to kind of do less crazy evening plans to like really save my energy for my client work, like maybe that's okay.
Mm.
Or I've got a young family and that's really important to me, and but I should be living my best, like, well, maybe
Mm.
your best life is being really present for your family, and like that's okay. So I think, yeah, sometimes we feel that pressure to be doing it all, and sometimes actually that's like something in our head telling ourselves we need to be doing it all when we don't.
Mm. Absolutely. And that's, I think, summed up my last few days perfectly because I got back to Switzerland after being in London and kind of the contrast of like London being go, 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 like schedule fully booked, and then coming to Switzerland and be like, it's May, there's no one here. And be like, and the kind of the story of like, well, should I be going out and doing this, or should I have gone stayed in London longer, or whatever? And then actually, it's just like
Mm.
taking that 5 minutes, just sit on the balcony and like look at the view, and I'm like, I think I'm okay. Like, but it is that it's so funny because you might not even notice like where is this pressure coming from to like do or be or whatever it is. So yeah, you summed up my last few days perfectly.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the language we use, right? Because you could be sitting on the balcony being like, I'm such a loser.
Mm.
Why am I here? That I should be, networking. Or you can sit on the balcony and be like, life has like peace right now,
Mm.
and it's leaving space for really exciting things to open up.
Absolutely.
Like, the energy between them is just huge. And yeah, I'm preaching, but I don't get it perfect at all either. And I think, yeah, some working out ways, things in life, whether that's a coffee on the balcony,
Mm.
flowers, a song, um, a, whatever it is. I heard someone the other day, it was like every morning they bounce on one of those little trampolines. And I
Love
was like,
that.
that sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely Google one of that. Just find your things that can
Mm.
shift it slightly. Or Tara Swart, that who's a neuroscientist, she said she wakes up in the morning, and I've started doing it too. And it's like, I'm so grateful for my pillow, so grateful for the
Mm.
way the light's coming through the blinds. Just rather than waking up and being like, in this lonely place again.
Yeah,
Maybe I should have stayed in London, you know, because our minds, they love
absolutely.
repeating these
Mm.
crazy stories.
I think it was on LinkedIn, and it's a woman who specializes in visualization. And she, or maybe it was someone else, but she said every morning I wake up and I say, I mean, I've also added bits to it, but what I took from it was
Mm.
I now say, good morning, world, to kind of be like, it's not just me, it's something bigger.
Yeah.
Thank you, and show me how good it can get. And it's just almost like that little, like, almost like childlike, like, you know, when you wake up on Christmas Day and there's that kind of not expectation, but you know it's Christmas Day and it's kind of that excitement. And you're like, why is that only on Christmas Day or my birthday or whatever? Like, let's just continue that every day. So as soon as I wake up, I'm like, right, whatever mood I wake up in, it's like, right, but I think also the gratitude and just be like, oh, wow. And just
Mm.
taking those minutes before you jump out of bed and, um, yeah,
Yeah, I love
move into
that. Or I
things.
did a course recently on like nurturing your dreamer within
Mm.
and like your capacity to dream. And by an amazing coach, and he was describing dreams can be a bit like the moon cycle.
Mm.
And so sometimes it's like, oh, you know, yes, like, I'm gonna go for it today. Sometimes you're in this like waning phase. But you can, how he describes like the your dreamer capacity is like the sun, and that's almost like a little flame
Mm.
in your heart, kind of reflecting in the moon. So when it is waning, to also be like, it's cool, like it's gonna come back
Exactly.
to full moon again.
Yeah. And yeah,
And
nothing lasts.
trusting that
Yeah,
season. Yeah.
absolutely. And like that feeling of like nothing lasts forever. Of, and I think that's also what's kind of what I'm able to really enjoy about right now is that it is so quiet, it's so still. If I was living in a place like that permanently, absolutely not. Like I would go mad. But I think
Mm,
it's just really appreciating this like slower time before the summer starts again. Not again, but the summer starts. And it's just that kind of like not expectation, but knowing that things are in constant motion and in flux, and just be like, it's okay that right now is this, and it doesn't, rather than attaching a meaning to it, it just is what
mm,
it is right now, and that's okay. And just being so
yeah.
much more present with that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you found, but I definitely found in my life whenever I given myself time for those pauses, like I moved to Norfolk to like a tiny village for a year, like, and it felt, I definitely had moments of like, God, what am I, you know, I hit pause on life, but after it, like life just
Mm,
accelerated in ways I couldn't have predicted. So yeah, I don't know
absolutely.
if that's like a thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did some
but it feels like it.
channeled writing like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I think it was just when I first moved into my apartment here, and I just got the message of like, just enjoy this time because you've no idea what's coming, and it's like, okay. So it's like, yeah, just really like being grateful for, and maybe for some people this is perfect and it is the way of life, but it's
Mm.
also that kind of acknowledging that want for something else and also just being grateful for where you are right now. And yeah, everything's in motion, everything's in flux. So,
Yeah, and being okay with both those things. I think it's that
mm,
human condition, like wanting more, wanting the next. You
mm,
know, we can, I, apart from like my grandparents when they were alive, like I can't think of anyone who's that good at just, you
mm,
know, just sitting still, and you know, life without growth is, I guess, like
mm,
decay. So I
yeah,
think to be okay with that whilst also finding room to be present, yeah,
mm,
is kind of where the gold dust is.
absolutely. And I think I've just got the message of like, and this is a little bit of a lesson, just being even more present with everything. So thank you. I feel like I got a mini coaching there.
Mm, yeah.
Um, so anything that you want to kind of round up on, or any tips or suggestions, or any final words to finish on?
I think something that people often ask me is like, well, how do you find the confidence to do these things? Because maybe you've thought of it, maybe you even felt that charge, but how do you feel, you know, find that confidence? Um, and it's a really hard question, so I don't know why I've given it to myself now, but I think, yeah, I just guess wanted to mention that. I don't think it comes easy like to anyone,
Mm.
and often we see these finished products, the jazzy LinkedIn posts, the thrilled to announce, but so much has come before that, and just to yeah, just to be more focused on building a life that like feels good rather than looks good. um I think that will always serve you best. And in terms of like confidence, sometimes even there are some tools, some things you can learn. So whether that's like unpicking what is the story I'm telling myself. So for example, when I left the police, it was like I carried around this belief that like you're quite weak, you can't do hard things.
Mm.
um that was it at 100 percent on the volume. But if you turn that down and actually was like, what would that be if I kind of listened to it at 2%? Because every thought might have some hidden wisdom. um it was there to keep you safe at some point. um and I think when I turned it down, it was kind of like, you deserve to be in places where you feel safe.
Mm.
Or you know don't put yourself in places where you're not safe. And like that 2% for sure, like I'll take that with me. I don't need to be proving my toughness to anyone anymore. But do I need to carry around the belief that I'm weak? Like, no
Mm.
thanks. So yeah, so I think whether that's working with a coach, whether that's journaling, whether that's whatever your jam is, just finding a way to not be ruled by your thoughts, because everyone has these thoughts holding them back. But I think when life feels really good, it's when you're like, yes, I see you, and either like I don't agree with you, or I see you and I'm gonna do it anyway. And
Mm.
that's like a choice rather than running, rather than feeling ashamed, rather than hiding. And that feeling of kind of walking through life feeling like you're at choice, like that to me is kind of freedom, and the kind of self authorship that makes a life like feel well lived.
I don't want to add anything to that. That was just, I was like, ah, that was amazing. Yeah. And I think it's even the confidence is, for me, I find confidence in like just dancing on my own and just like
Mm.
feeling my body actually being like, yes, like, because I get so much joy from that. And I think so it's just adding everything that we've spoken about and just kind of putting it into your pot and building up for yourself, and whether that's community or kind of addressing those thoughts and beliefs, but just, yeah, building up almost your toolkit to be like, okay, how do I want to move forwards from here, and what feels right now. So yeah.
Yeah, do I need a big like power move playlist? Do
Mm.
I need,
Oh yeah.
what, find your thing? And like, because everyone needs things, like no one gets through this without their tricks and toolbox,
Mm.
for sure.
Yeah, and if we can just add a bit more joy to our lives in the process, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, I can stop Googling how to have fun now.
Stick a playlist on and have a dance. Yeah,
Yeah, it's found in the small things, not in the
absolutely.
like crazy courses. And yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I
thank
know
you.
I got so much out of that, so I'm sure everyone also will. And yeah, I will attach all your links and everything. So if anyone does want to work with you, not if, when people want to work with you, all the information is there. But yeah, thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
for
time.
sure. Thank you. Been such a pleasure. And yeah, thanks for making me open up. It's hard to sometimes speak your things and the things that are important to you. And yeah, it's been a privilege to do that with you.
Thank you.